Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. This is actually the last video that I am recording before I head to France. I'm leaving for the airport in 3.5 hours, so getting one last video recorded, so there'll be some content while I'm gone. There will be some live streams and other things that are happening while that's going on, but wanted to take one more look at a story from Normandy, since it's where I'm going to be heading this week. This is the story of First Lieutenant Jimmy Monteith, who received the Medal of Honor for his actions at Omaha Beach on D-Day. And my friend JD from the History Underground, who I'm going to be with in Normandy this week, has done a video about this topic from the site, and I'll link that for you at the end so you can check that out, see the site for yourself. But today we're taking a look at the story as told by our friends over at Yarnhub. Link is down in the description to their original content. They do a fantastic job, and recently they've really upped their game in terms of their animation. I always thought it was great, but it's even better now than it was. They tell these stories in like 5 to 10 minute videos. It's a great place if you want to get quick snippets of great information about incredible stories, particularly about military history. So let's go ahead and check out this story of the man who led tanks up Omaha Beach.
It's June the 6th, 1944. D-Day. The landing craft sways back and forth in the heavy waves.
They say heavy waves. You know, many people are familiar with the fact that D-Day was originally supposed to be on June 5th, 1944, but it got postponed by 24 hours because of the weather. But something people don't often talk about is that while the weather itself was a little bit better in terms of what was needed for the airborne divisions, for example, to drop on D-Day because of how bad the winds were, the swell, the waves were actually worse on June 6th than they had been on June 5th. And so that's one of the reasons why there were so many things that went wrong. That many of the landing craft got pushed much further east than they were supposed to, especially at Omaha Beach, but also at Utah and some of the other beaches. But it also wreaked havoc on these DDs, these specially made tanks that were built to be able to float in. They had what are called duplex drives, and many of them sank because they weren't tested in waves that were that high.
First Lieutenant Jimmy W. Monteith of the 16th Infantry Regiment, 1st Infantry Division, hangs on for dear life.
So Omaha Beach is divided into a number of sectors, but basically kind of the big picture is that the 29th Infantry Division, specifically the 116th Infantry Regiment, is landing in the first wave on the west side of Omaha Beach. Omaha Beach is like 5 miles long altogether, and the east side is the 1st Infantry Division and the 16th Infantry Regiment, and that's who we're at here. So this is on the east side of Omaha Beach.
Ahead are the white sands of Omaha Beach, watched over by fortresses of concrete and steel. Explosions fill the air, the incessant pounding of artillery, but a taste of what they're going to face. The beach comes ever closer, and rain starts clattering against the steel of the craft. But it's not water, but a rain of German lead.
Now, I can't say specifically what happened in this particular sector where Jimmy Monteith landed, but these landing craft were under pretty heavy mortar and artillery fire as they came in. But I think in most places the German machine gunners were given specific instructions to wait until the doors went down on the landing craft to start firing, and to fire specifically on that. These MG-42s, you'll often hear quoted that they had like a 1,200 round per minute ability to fire, but they didn't fire 1,200 rounds in a minute, because if they fired for a minute straight, they'd overheat to the point where they wouldn't be usable anymore. So they would fire in short bursts that had a speed of 1,200 rounds a minute, but they were only firing like only a few at a time. But they would have waited to fire until the doors went down on the craft.
The men aboard are terrified. They clutch their rifles, facing down the barrel of what from here seems like an insurmountable foe. Monteith doesn't know it, But he's about to perform a feat that will compel the legendary generals Dwight D. Eisenhower and Omar Bradley to advocate him for the nation's highest honor. This video is sponsored by Enlisted.
Ooh, good game.
You can
good
join
game.
the battle with this World War II multiplayer shooter with strong focus on historical authenticity. Try one of the distinct historical campaigns. We loved playing The Invasion of Normandy. This campaign includes unique maps, troop types, weapons and vehicles that bring you right into the action of D-Day. Enlisted features hundreds of firearms and specialized weapons, including the M1 Garand, as featured in today's video. With its hit power of 12 and reload time in less than 3 seconds, it's a trusty American rifle that'll serve you well on the battlefield. And there's a special offer for our viewers: 3 days of premium time and several orders for troops and weapons available by following the link in the description. Play Enlisted for free on PC, Xbox Series X, S, and PS5. Follow the link to download the game and get your exclusive bonus now. We'll see you on the battlefield. The craft comes to a stop, and the moment they've dreaded has arrived.
Move fast. I'll see you on the beach.
Now, most of these craft, about 80% of all of the naval personnel involved on D-Day are British. Something like 16% of them are Americans, and then you have various other nations. So the coxswains on most of these landing craft are going to be British. And depending on what part of the beach you were on and depending on the craft, some of them came up pretty close and maybe jumped out into like waist deep water or knee deep water. Other places it was over their heads, just like what you see in Saving Private Ryan.
The doors fall, and Monteith leads the charge off the boat. They fall into waist deep water, desperately wading their way through as machine gun fire splashes all around them and strikes a few unfortunate souls. Monteith doesn't look back. He knows he can't. He reaches dry land and runs, shouting for his men to follow.
See, human instinct is to take cover, right? I mean, that is everything in us is going to be about self-preservation in that moment. You hope that your training is going to be enough to overcome that. And the 1st Infantry Division, these are veterans. They've fought already quite a bit, whereas the 29th over to the west is a brand new unit. This is a National Guard unit. But that doesn't mean that all of these guys are veterans, because obviously there's been replacements, things like that. But the worst thing you can do is freeze and become a stationary target. You've got to move. They're landing kind of in between low and high tide, so there's a lot of beach to cover. But they had to do that in order to be able to get the craft in without hitting. They had all these poles with mines on top of them, and so they didn't want to be hitting those. So they've got to get to where they can get some cover. And the bombers that came in just before the landing were supposed to drop these bombs along the beach and along where the German Widerstandsnests are, these strong points. But at Omaha, they didn't do a good job of getting them on the beach. They hit them too far inland. They were supposed to create craters on the beach so there were places for cover for the men.
Explosions rock the beach, prearranged artillery striking up and down the sands, tearing through the men. He runs at 200 yards of carnage, followed by over 100 men.
That is a long distance to run under that kind of fire. Oh my gosh.
But he's lucky and makes it unharmed. Ahead, they face a web of barbed wire, layered in plain view of deadly pillboxes. He identifies the best spot to blow it open and orders a couple of his men armed with Bangalore mines to follow.
These Bangalores are such a great invention, and so Omaha has what are called draws. They're like 4 or 5 exits off the beach, and those are the areas they've got to secure. So you're not going to take these beaches with infantry alone. You need tanks, you need artillery, you need those things, and so you've got to take these places for the tanks to be able to get inland.
They climb and crawl through the sand, hiding behind a meager cover of undergrowth and the barbed wire itself. Machine gun fire rips above their heads as they connect the tubes together and shove it through the barbed wire. They return to the embankment and detonate it, clearing a 9-foot gash into the wire.
Nice.
Monteith leaps out of cover, leading the charge through heavy fire. They run through the barbed wire and stop at the foot of their next massive hurdle. 2 minefields block their path. Fortunately, their vicinity to the emplacements have made them harder to spot, and the machine gun nests focus their fire on the poor souls still disembarking and running through the sands.
Another really tough part, and one of the reasons why Omaha is such... Omaha, there's like 2,500 casualties at Omaha Beach. Compared to Utah, there's only a couple of hundred. And I know there are 3 other beaches, Juneau, Golden Sword. I just don't know that much yet about those ones. I'm going to be learning that this week, hoping to get to a couple of those beaches while I'm there. But Omaha's a crescent shape, which makes it so much easier to defend. And the Germans would put artillery and machine guns and things like that on the ends to where they could cover the whole length of that beach.
Hurrying not to let the relative safety to go to waste, the soldiers once again prepare long stretches of Bangalore mines and slide them into the minefield. They lie down for cover, and a mine blows a path through. They run across, reaching the second minefield, and repeat the process. They're placing the mines when suddenly, machine gun fire tears through the gathered men. They scatter for cover, and the combat engineers hurriedly detonate the mines. Monteith runs through the minefield, followed by some of his men. They huddle against the rocky embankment lining the beach.
And in their meticulous planning for D-Day, the Allies had thought of all this stuff. They knew that there were minefields. They had tested whether or not the beaches were going to be strong enough to be able to support armor. They had thought of all of these things, but as is the case with such a complicated plan with so many details, there are always going to be parts of it that either you didn't think of or didn't go the way you expect or don't unfold the way you planned for them to. So guys landing at the wrong spot, airborne troops being dropped in the wrong drop zones, bombs being dropped too far inland, all of these things kind of mean that the minute you go into action, all the plans are out the window.
Taking cover from this surprise pillbox, overlooking their vector of attack. He analyzes the situation. That pillbox must go, and fast. He looks back at the beach and spots 2 Sherman tanks in the sand. German machine gun tracer is ricocheting off their armor. Monteith tells his men to stay put, and fearlessly he charges out of cover, runs back across the beach amidst the hellfire.
So these Sherman tanks in all the beaches, they were supposed to be released at a certain point, and there was one squadron of these tanks where like every single one of them that was released into the water sank with their crews. And like 2 survived in the one group. And thankfully there were some officers in command of some of these tank units who refused to have their tanks released as planned because they saw what was happening and they adjusted. And this is what makes great leadership on D-Day, are the men who take the plans that were given to them and throw them out the window and said, you know what, this isn't working. And they adjust and they make other plans. And some of the places where you get tanks ashore is because of these changes in plans.
Running through the obstacles, racing through the killing fields until he reaches the 2 Shermans. He takes cover beside them and bangs on the armor with his rifle. The commander inside cracks open the hatch and shouts, questioning him what the hell he wants. Monteith tells him that a pillbox is keeping his advance pinned and he needs the Shermans to follow him to take it out. The crew agree and he runs back up the beach. He takes cover on the embankment, waving at the tanks to follow. Guiding them through slowly but surely, he braves the air thick with German lead.
And you see this is the device that was placed on these tanks in order to keep them floating as they were released to come into shore. But this is a great example of working together, right? Men from different units coordinating their efforts, thinking on the fly, adjusting. These are the little successes that make D-Day work.
Signaling the machines by hand through the barbed wire and across the treacherous minefields. Finally, the pillbox comes into view. Monteith runs for the Shermans and shouts its position to the men inside before a volley of gunfire pings off their armor. He hastily takes cover behind the Shermans as they take aim and open fire.
That's a cool animation.
The pillbox is silenced with a brutal strike of 75mm shells
Nice.
of high explosive.
So these pillboxes, all of these, the pillboxes, the Widerstands nests, things like that, they're pretty strong, but they're made of a rather inferior concrete just because of the shortage of raw materials that the Germans have and just the hundreds of miles that they've got to cover with defenses. But they still hold up really, really well.
Satisfied, Monteith and his men charge up the rocks and storm the German trench works. They find little resistance within, as the Germans are still focused on the beach.
That's a pretty
Using
cool
the trenches
shot, too.
against the enemy, they burst into nearby bunkers and pillboxes and catch the crews by complete surprise.
Let's just take a minute and appreciate. I don't know the first thing about animation. I don't know what kind of work goes into making this stuff, but props to whoever not only animated all this, but kind of directed it, right? Because just the cool kind of shots that they're doing, really neat stuff.
Germans in the neighbouring sectors realise they have a breach and hastily rush to stop it as Monteith and his men take cover against the French hedgerows. Mobile machine gun crews take positions across the field ahead and to either side of Monteith. They are swiftly surrounded and the German commander shouts at them to surrender. Monteith ignores him. In response to their silence, the Germans open fire. The air is filled with the cracks of bullets flying overhead, but Monteith is unshaken. He decides the German machine guns across the field are the lesser threat, as the tall hedgerow, thick with rocks and roots, provides ample cover. The ones on their flanks are the biggest concern. He orders his men to stay put and cover him as he fits a rifle grenade to the end of his weapon's barrel.
So again, this is leadership, right? This is a lieutenant. He could have just as easily ordered other people to do this. He could have stayed with his men, ordered somebody else to do it, but he's leading by example.
He leaps into action and his men open fire behind him. Keeping along the hedgerow, he spots the muzzle flash of an MG-42 firing away amongst the greenery. He approaches, undetected, aims his rifle, and pulls the trigger. Monteith's aim is deadly, and the position explodes in a cloud of dirt and shrapnel, forever silenced.
This is where training matters. You know, a lot of these men have been training for years or have had experience in combat in the 1st Infantry Division's case. And there's no replacing that good training, whereas a lot of these German soldiers at this point in the war have had very little training. Many of them are conscripts. Many of them are foreign conscripts. Not a lot of training before they're sent to the front.
Returns, quietly, triumphant, and orders his men to repeat the strategy against the machine gun on the left flank. They open fire, and once again he leaps, but this time it's to an open field. He's unfazed, charging with determination. He reaches a suitable firing spot, but he's lost track of the enemy. He fires where he thinks they are, but he's mistaken. He reloads behind cover. He waits for something to reveal their position, but they simply aren't firing. With astonishing bravery, he purposely draws their fire. The machine gun fires at him, riddling the dirt with bullets. Fortunately, the meager cover proves sufficient, and now he's seen their position. He repositions himself and takes another shot.
That's cool animation too. It's really neat.
The melody of the German machine gun comes to an end with a bang.
Wow.
Monteith turns around and runs back to his men, braving the open field a second time. The beat of the brave heart of Virginia is brought to a tragic end in the green fields of France. Jimmy W. Monteith now rests in the American cemetery in Normandy, a fallen hero among many.
We'll be visiting
His
his
cross
grave.
is emblazoned with a golden star and the inscription, Medal of Honor. The medal would be delivered to his mother during a simple ceremony in her home. She placed it next to a picture of Jimmy she kept on her mantle. Please.
A hero. Absolute hero. Definitely check out Yarnhub. They do such a great job telling their stories, and as you can see, the quality of their work is fantastic. And I know that they are fans of this channel, so shout out to you guys. Thank you guys for your support over the years for what I do. And please check out the link at the end here to my friend JD's video telling Jimmy Monteith's story from the site where it happened. Thanks for watching.